Well, that's fitting for this channel. Good morning from Texas on this sunrise ride. And for those of you who don't live in Texas, I'd like to introduce you to our governor, Greg Abbott. Give you a little bit of history. Way back in the 1990s, up until 1994. That's the last time we had a Democratic governor in the state of Texas. Her name was Ann Richards. And in the Texas Democratic Party, she's a little legendary. There's even a one-woman show that performs with professional actors and all of that stuff. But in 1994, Ann Richards lost the election to a candidate from a well-known political family, West Texas Oil, part owner of the Texas Rangers, named George W. Bush. And he stayed the governor until he was inaugurated president in 2001, at which time his lieutenant governor, a man named Rick Perry, became the governor of Texas, who was reelected in 2002, 2006, 2010. And that made him, at the time, the longest-serving Texas governor ever. And this is Rick Perry, who is best known to people outside of Texas as the man who, when he ran for president in 2012, got up on a debate stage and forgot what government organizations he was going to eliminate, which department, cabinet-level departments he was going to get rid of. And actually he had to say, oops, on the debate stage. So Governor Rick Oops Perry was the successor. He did not run for re-election in 2014, after his 2012 presidential election bid, and he would later find a cabinet position in the first term of Donald Trump. But in 2014, the then Texas Attorney General, a man named Greg Abbott, ran for Texas governor, and he was elected in 2014. He was reelected in 2018. In 2022, Beto O'Rourke ran against him, and Greg Abbott was reelected again, and he's running for reelection again. So now he's going to be the longest serving governor in the state of Texas. And if this guy wins, that's going to mean for 30 years, the state of Texas will have had two governors. And Greg Abbott has become kind of a MAGA poster child, and he has lately, especially lately over the last few years, just waged war on public education in the state of Texas. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So let's go back to 2022. His big re-election bid in 2022, and even though the 2022 midterms were good for Democrats in that they weren't as bad as they could have been. Usually the party that wins the White House gets wiped out in the midterm elections 2 years later, and Democratic Party didn't quite. I was really despondent because we still kept Greg Abbott as governor. And two of his main campaign planks in 2022 were something called a Parental Bill of Rights, which gives parents, on paper, give parents voice in their students' education, but at the same time it takes decision-making away from the trained professionals. And he ran on establishing private school vouchers. Education savings plans, I think is what he calls them, because, Republican politicians can't ever call things exactly what they are, because if they did that, they wouldn't be popular. So these private school vouchers, what he ran on in 2022, the legislative session that came in 2023, had enough Republicans that were against it, that supported public education, that it did not pass. In the meantime, Abbott wouldn't allow any school funding bills to pass until the legislature approved his voucher plan. And so inflation's going up, cost of diesel fuel to run these school buses is going up, and the schools are getting broke. They're running out of money. They're having to make budget cuts right and left. And as a result of the voucher scheme not getting passed for the 2024 election cycle, Greg Abbott backed primary challengers against the Republicans who voted against it, including the Republican that represents where I live, and backed them with people who would support the voucher plan. And needless to say, they won their primaries. And since they won in what are very safe red districts, state legislative districts and state Senate districts, at least they were in 2024, just so you know, I think this is a Trump plus 40-some county that I live in. And anyway, they got elected and they passed the voucher plan. The voucher plan is kicking in right now, February 2026. Parents are able to sign their kids up for it so they can take $10,000 of the state's money and enroll their kid in a private school, which for the most part are religious schools. Not every private school is a religious school, but quite a few of them are. Well, that wasn't enough. So also in this legislative session, it became a requirement in state law for public school classrooms to post the 10 Commandments in their classroom. This has immediately had legal challenges, but in order for the state education agency, it's called the Texas Education Agency, or the TEA, it's run by a guy named Mike Morath, who does whatever Greg Abbott tells him to do, and he does it at the drop of a hat. Like, for instance, schools are starting to get better accountability scores on their standardized test. Then they change the standardized test to make it harder. And that test is kind of difficult. And what happens if a school gets low accountability scores, the state government takes over control of that school district from the local elected officials. And those school districts are not happy about things that have happened there. Look up things that have happened around Houston and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm digressing. I haven't even gotten to the new stuff. So let's just look over the last few months. In September, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there was a lot of posts online and a lot of people getting in trouble for saying negative things about Charlie Kirk, even if those negative things they said about Charlie Kirk were quotes from Charlie Kirk. And Greg Abbott told Mike Morath, any public school teacher that you see posting anything negative about Charlie Kirk on social media, investigate them. People lost their teaching certificates over that. Then, back a couple months ago, or maybe 1 month ago, I don't know. It's recently, but not like this week. Greg Abbott and Mike Morath are now going to push for Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization that's now run by his wife, to create Turning Point USA chapters in every Texas public school. Now, the Texas public schools already have the Fellowship of Christian Athletes as the right-wing Christian nationalist organization represented in their schools. But now we're going to go to Turning Point USA because FCA is not MAGA enough. And the schools are going to be required on the next legislative session to do that, probably. Well, so we got the vouchers and all of that. And then last week, and this is what I was going to make this about, but last week it became well known that Greg Abbott and his Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick are using as campaign planks eliminating property taxes that go to public schools, like zeroing them out. That they've raised the homestead exemptions, which makes a big cut in the property taxes. And you may be thinking, well, hey, lower property taxes, that's good, right? Well, the thing is, the public schools in the state of Texas, that's where they get their funding, is from property taxes. It's where they get the lion's share of their funding. And now the governor wants to take that completely away. So If he wins re-election and the Republicans maintain control of the Texas legislature, then it is very likely that that will pass, because it'll be viewed as a tax cut, and no Republican's going to vote against a tax cut, even though it's going to result in basically eliminating the funding completely from public schools. They're going to become untenable. But no, he's got to go even further. Last weekend, in the wake of the murder of Alex Preddy in Minnesota, there were ICE protests all across the country, and this past weekend they started to include schools, high schools, and students doing walkout protests. And of course the right-wing MAGA sphere is saying, oh, well, they're just trying to get out of class, they're protesting algebra. Well, you know, for some of them that might be true, but I know that for some of them, they know exactly why they're walking out, and they're making a political statement. And some of the MAGA sphere are saying, well, hey, you know, shouldn't they be adults before they can protest? Well, some of these kids are. You know, it's a high school. There are 18-year-olds at high school. There are even 19-year-olds in high school that can register to vote. They can serve in the military. They deserve the right to protest. It's a First Amendment guarantee. Anyway, Governor Greg Abbott tells Mike Morath of the TEA to give consequences to students who walk out. They're going to be marked with an unexcused absence. Okay, well, big deal, right? Attendance is how the schools get their funding. The state, all the property taxes that are collected that are supposed to go to the school, go to the state comptroller, and they get distributed by the state government, well, based on their average attendance at school. Okay, so that's going to hurt the school's funding even more. But then, if he finds out that any school districts helped with that protest, like told the kids it was happening, or maybe had their school resource officers directing traffic so people didn't run the kids over, then the school's going to lose its funding completely. They'll have a penalty for assisting this protest. If a school teacher talks about this protest to the kids as just kind of current events and doing a little bit of civics and things like that, and just saying this is coming up and this is a peaceful way to protest, that teacher could have their teaching certificate revoked. These are the consequences from the TEA. So yeah, they're not allowed to protest ICE. They got to have the 10 Commandments posted in their classroom. You can't say anything negative about Charlie Kirk. And new Texas legislature from this last session, you can't do what they consider aiding a student to transition. If the student considers themselves non-binary, you can't aid them in their transition. This doesn't mean the BS that Donald Trump was talking about in the election of teachers doing the surgeries at school. I can't believe people believe that. But we can't, the teachers can't call the kid by the name that they want them to call them by. It has to be their legal name or an abbreviation of their legal name, and that's it. And that can also result in the teacher losing their certificate. There's all of that. This is causing Texas teachers to leave the profession. It's causing Texas schools to not be as well funded as they should be. And it's just going to make stuff harder. And why does Greg Abbott do this? One, because he can. That's kind of the main reason. He is still of the firm belief that you have to be as MAGA as possible, and taking it to a very religious Christian nationalist extreme, and becoming more authoritarian than Donald Trump even could be. And he can, because the big name Democrats who are running in the midterm, they're all running against John Cornyn in the Senate. There's a good chance that John Cornyn might get beaten by Ken Paxton, who's another who's the Attorney General of the state of Texas, another guy that's going to appeal to MAGA in that he's very vindictive and he's been indicted a bunch of times. So he's exactly what MAGA likes. And he might beat John Cornyn, and we can't have Ken Paxton be the senator, right? So the three biggest names in Texas politics, Colin Allred, James Tellerico, and Jasmine Crockett, were at one point all running for the Democratic nomination for Senate. Not a single one of them was running for the Democratic nomination for governor. When Jasmine Crockett got into the Senate race, Colin Allred saw that there was going to be too much heat, so he backed out, and I thought, oh great, Colin Allred's going to run for governor. No, he's running for his congressional seat again in the House of Representatives. So now our front runner for the Texas Democratic nomination for governor is Gina Hinojosa. And, which, I mean, she's great. She just doesn't have the statewide name recognition that I think we need to be able to take out Greg Abbott. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to vote for her. I'm still going to do what I can to help get her elected. But, I mean, it would be nice if instead of James Tellerico and Jasmine Crockett tearing each other apart over the next month and a half before the primary election, if one of them was running for Senate and one of them was running for governor. It would be great. But Greg Abbott drives me insane. And even if we get a huge blue wave in November, the only way that I see that help in Texas is if we take the legislature. And then we're just going to get a governor who will just call special session after special session until he gets what he wants, because that's what Rick Perry and Greg Abbott had a track record of doing. Okay, well, that's this week's rant. Pay attention to the war on public education led by the Texas governor. I will talk to you probably in a week or so. Thanks for watching, y'all.